The desolate Nevada highway stretched out before us like a sun-baked scar on the landscape. It was late July, and the air shimmered with heat as Sarah hummed along to classic rock blasting from the car speakers. My name's Ben, and we were newly engaged on a road trip from San Francisco to Austin, Texas. The plan was a scenic drive, a chance to explore before the chaos of wedding planning began. The only problem? Scenic gave way to desolate around the Nevada border. We hadn't seen another car for miles when a lone figure emerged from the heat haze, thumb outstretched. "Hitchhiker?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowed. We usually avoided picking people up, but something about this guy, maybe the desperation in his eyes, tugged at my heartstrings. He was young, maybe early 20s, with a shock of blonde hair bleached almost white by the sun. "Sure, hop in," I said, pulling over. He scrambled into the back seat, a wide grin splitting his face. "Thanks a bunch, man. Name's Alex, and I'm heading to Vegas. You guys lifesavers." Alex was a chatterbox, filling the car with tales of his travels and dreams of becoming a musician. He was charming enough, but there was an undercurrent of nervousness in his eyes that kept flickering across his face. It was subtle, but it sent shivers down my spine. "So, this highway," Alex began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "it's cursed, you know." Sarah snorted. "Cursed? Seriously?" Alex leaned forward, his eyes wide. "No joke. Heard stories about it growing up. Locals call it the Devil's Stretch. People disappear out here, vanish without a trace. Cars break down in the middle of nowhere, then mysteriously reappear miles down the road." We exchanged skeptical glances. Alex seemed genuine enough, but his story reeked of campfire tales. Still, a flicker of unease settled in my stomach. As dusk approached, casting long shadows across the highway, strange things started happening. The headlights flickered, momentarily plunging us into darkness. Static filled the radio, punctuated by disembodied whispers that sent chills crawling up my spine. Then, I saw it. A fleeting glimpse of a dark figure darting across the road, just beyond the reach of the headlights. My heart hammered in my chest. Was it just a trick of the eye? "Did you see that?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "See what?" Sarah asked, her eyes fixed on the road. "Something, crossing the road." She scoffed. "Probably just a coyote, you jumpy fool." But I wasn't so sure. The unsettling feeling intensified with every passing mile. We hadn't passed a single gas station or town for hours, and the GPS signal seemed to be fading in and out. Suddenly, the car sputtered. The engine died, and we coasted to a stop on the shoulder of the deserted road. Panic welled up inside me. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. "Flat tire?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with a hint of concern. I stepped out of the car, a sinking feeling in my gut. The spare tire compartment was empty. Flat. And no cell service. We were well and truly stranded. "This is great," I mumbled, frustration and fear warring within me. Alex, surprisingly, seemed calm. He suggested we follow the power lines in the distance, hoping they'd lead us to a town. With no other options, we started walking, the setting sun casting long, eerie shadows across the barren landscape. Every rustle in the bushes made me jump. Every gust of wind sounded like a distant cry. Then, I heard it again, the whispering on the radio. Only this time, it was clearer, a distorted voice chanting something in another language. Sarah squeezed my hand, her face pale. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the desolate landscape around us. The figure from before, the same shadowy form, flitted across the horizon just beyond the power lines. This time, it was closer. Panic seized me. We were being followed, but by what? Was Alex right? Was there something out here, something unseen but undeniably present? Suddenly, a flicker of light pierced through the darkness. A truck, headlights blazing, approached from the opposite direction. We waved our arms frantically, a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. The truck screeched to a halt, and a burly trucker emerged, his face etched with concern. Relief washed over us like a tidal wave. The trucker, a kind soul named Hank, offered us a ride to the nearest town, a dusty outpost some 30 miles down the highway. As we crammed ourselves into his cab, Sarah cast a worried glance at Alex, who sat silently in the back. "You folks look like you've seen a ghost," Hank rumbled, glancing at us in the rearview mirror. "Just car trouble," I stammered, my voice still shaky. "And maybe, well, some strange things." Hank chuckled, a sound surprisingly deep in the confines of the small cab. "Lots of strange things out there on these lonely stretches, city folks. Probably the heat messing with your heads." We didn't elaborate, but Alex leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something out there, isn't there?" Hank sighed, his eyes hardening for a moment. "Let's just say, the Devil's Stretch has a reputation. Folks get spooked easily out here. But remember," he added, his gaze meeting mine in the mirror, "sometimes the real danger isn't what you see, but what you don't." The ride to town was a blur. Sarah dozed off, exhausted from the ordeal, while I replayed the events of the evening in my head. Was Alex right? Was this highway cursed, or were we just tired, stressed, and susceptible to suggestion? In the small, dusty diner where we refueled both our bodies and the truck, Alex was surprisingly absent. Hank shrugged when I inquired, muttering something about needing to stretch his legs. We never saw him again. The rest of the trip to Austin was uneventful. The car, miraculously, didn't break down again. The whispers on the radio vanished. The shadowy figure remained a chilling memory. But the experience on the Devil's Stretch stayed with me. Was it a brush with something supernatural? Or a testament to the power of suggestion in an isolated environment? Years later, settled in Austin with our firstborn nestled in our arms, I received a package in the mail. It contained a battered guitar and a handwritten note. The note was brief, signed simply Alex. Turns out, it read, "Some dreams just need a different road." The guitar, surprisingly, was in pristine condition. On a whim, I took it to a local music store, hoping to sell it. The shop owner, an old man with a keen eye, recognized it instantly. "This," he said, his voice filled with awe, "belonged to a young man who played like he had a devil at his heels. Said his music came from a place most folks wouldn't dare go." I stared at the guitar, a shiver running down my spine. Was Alex real? Had he been playing us all along, crafting a terrifying story to fuel our fear? Or had he truly encountered something out there, something that fueled his music and perhaps his escape? I never got any answers, but the experience on the Devil's Stretch became a story I tell around campfires, a cautionary tale about the power of the unknown and the whispers on the wind that sometimes carry truths we may not be ready to hear. The highway remains, a lonely scar on the vast canvas of the American West, and whether it's cursed or not, it serves as a reminder, sometimes, the scariest things are the ones we create in our own minds, fueled by isolation and the endless expanse of the dark unknown. Let's hop onto story number 2, but before I begin reading, make sure that you have subscribed to Mr. Scare for regular horror podcasts. It was 2:37 a.m., the clock on the dashboard mocking me with its relentless reminder of how bad of an idea this solo road trip across Wyoming was turning out to be. Exhaustion gnawed at my bones, and the endless expanse of dark highway stretched before me like a black ribbon. My phone was dead, the only soundtrack the rhythmic hum of the engine and the occasional howl of a coyote. Just when I was about to cave and pull over for a forced nap, a flicker of light caught my eye in the rearview mirror. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the light, a reflection of the moon on a distant car. But then it flickered again, and another one appeared, further in the distance. Curiosity, that relentless itch I could never seem to scratch, took over. Ignoring the throbbing in my eyelids, I slowed down and scanned the horizon. The lights weren't cars. They were faint, flickering points of orange nestled amidst the rolling hills. A fire? Was there a town out here I hadn't seen on the map? Against my better judgment, I veered off the main highway onto a dusty, barely visible road that seemed to lead towards them. The further I ventured, the denser the darkness grew. The air hung heavy, choked by the smell of something damp and decaying. The flickering lights grew brighter, revealing dozens of torches lining the sides of the road, casting an eerie orange glow on the desolate landscape. Then, I saw them. Figures. silhouettes emerging from the shadows, their movements jerky and unnatural. As I approached, their details sharpened, and a wave of nausea washed over me. They were vaguely human-shaped, but skeletal, their clothes ragged and hanging off their emaciated frames. One of them, its eyes hollow sockets, reached out with a long, bony hand, clawing at the air. Panic choked off my scream. My foot slammed on the brake, sending the car skidding to a halt a few feet from the nearest figure. They all turned towards me, their faces frozen in silent screams of agony. My heart hammered against my ribs, trapped in a frantic drum solo. These weren't ghosts. This wasn't a horror movie. This was something far worse, something real, something utterly terrifying. "Help me," croaked a voice, raspy and wet, coming from one of the figures. My blood ran cold. They weren't mindless monsters, but lost souls trapped in this desolate purgatory. But then another voice, closer this time, whispered in my ear, right by the open driver's side window. It wasn't a human voice. It was a sound I couldn't describe, a rasping hiss that sent shivers down my spine. The figure beside me lunged, its skeletal fingers reaching for the door handle. Terror propelled me into action. Throwing the car into reverse, I peeled away, tires spitting gravel as I tore down the road. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The torches blurred into a fiery streak, the figures left behind in a nightmare tableau. I didn't stop until I reached the familiar glow of the highway, the sight of a passing truck feeling like a beacon of hope. Back on the well-lit road, the adrenaline started to wear off, replaced by a bone-deep chill. Where was this place? What were those figures? The internet, fueled by my newfound paranoia, offered tantalizingly few answers. There were local legends in Wyoming about a Lost Souls highway, a deserted stretch of road where the restless dead were said to wander. Of course, I dismissed it as a campfire story until tonight. Now, the story echoed in my head with a chilling truth. I hadn't stumbled upon a deserted town. I had stumbled upon a highway for the lost, a desolate stretch where the boundaries between life and death blurred into a horrifying limbo. I continued driving, the Wyoming landscape now a terrifying reminder of what I had escaped. Every rustle in the bushes sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't until hours later, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky, that I finally dared to pull over and rest. My phone miraculously had a sliver of charge left, enough to call my sister, my voice shaking as I recounted the nightmarish experience. She, bless her pragmatism, chalked it up to sleep deprivation and a highway known for strange lights caused by natural gas deposits. Part of me, a rational part, clung to her explanation. But another part, the part that had glimpsed the desperation and anguish in the eyes of those lost souls, knew better. They weren't hallucinations. They were real, and a chilling reminder that some places deserve to remain unseen, untouched. Shaken but determined to reach my destination, I pressed on. The highway stretched out before me, no longer just a path, but a stark divide between the world of the living and whatever that desolate road traversed. The memory of the figures lingered, a haunting image that refused to fade. I found myself driving with the radio off, the silence preferable to the intrusion of upbeat music against the backdrop of my experience. Days turned into a week, the landscape changing from Wyoming's stark beauty to the lush greenery of the Pacific Northwest, my final destination. Yet, the encounter left its mark. I found myself drawn to the paranormal documentaries I'd always avoided, desperately searching for answers. One night, a flicker of recognition caught my eye. A grainy video clip, filmed in Wyoming, showed a desolate stretch of road eerily illuminated by flickering torches. My stomach churned. This wasn't a local legend. This was real. The narrator spoke in hushed tones about the Lost Souls Road, a place where those who died with unfinished business or unresolved trauma were tethered, unable to find peace. The documentary offered no explanation for the figures, no solution to help them. It was a chilling reminder of mortality, of the fragility of life. Reaching Seattle, I felt a sense of relief, a homecoming of sorts. Life picked up its usual pace, work, friends, the mundane routines that had once felt boring now seemed comforting. Yet, the experience stayed with me, a constant whisper at the back of my mind. There were no further encounters, no ghostly figures haunting my dreams. But sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself staring at the starlit sky, wondering what secrets it held, what lay beyond the veil of life. The Lost Souls Road became a morbid fascination, an unspoken truth I carried with me. I never told anyone the full story, the terror too raw, the explanation too unbelievable. But it changed me. It made me appreciate the living world, the warmth of human connection, the fleeting beauty of existence. It became a reminder to live each day to the fullest, to chase my dreams, to leave no unfinished business, no regrets in my wake. Because if the whispers of the Lost Souls Road were true, then leaving an unfinished symphony behind was a fate worse than death. It was an eternity of restless wandering, a silent scream trapped in a desolate purgatory. The Lost Souls Road remained a scar on the landscape, a reminder of the delicate balance between life and oblivion. And I, a reluctant witness, forever marked by a glimpse into the chilling consequences of an incomplete journey. It was a little after 11 p.m., and the deserted highway stretched before me like a black serpent under the sickly glow of the moon. Heading back to Phoenix after a weekend trip to visit my parents in Tucson was never the most exciting drive, but tonight it felt downright ominous. The air crackled with a static energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end, and the silence was broken only by the rhythmic hum of my Honda Civic. My phone was dead, a casualty of my mom's endless Facebook scrolling eating up the last of its battery. Normally, I wouldn't mind the solitude. I enjoyed the quiet, the chance to crank up the radio and belt along to cheesy 80s tunes. But tonight, even Bon Jovi's Livin' on a Prayer couldn't shake the creeping dread gnawing at me. Then the radio sputtered. Static filled the air, followed by the familiar opening riff of Livin' on a Prayer. Great, I thought, a stuck CD. I reached for the knob, intending to skip to another station, but my hand froze. The song was playing, in reverse. Words were jumbled, instruments screeching in a discordant symphony of wrongness. Panic flickered in my chest. I slammed the knob to another station, hoping to find anything else, but it was the same distorted nightmare on every frequency. I turned it off entirely, the silence somehow more unsettling than the macabre music. A few minutes later, a familiar landmark loomed ahead, the towering silhouette of a water tower emblazoned with a faded advertisement for Big Al's Barbecue. I remembered passing it maybe an hour ago. Maybe two. The exhaustion was messing with my head. Then came the diner. A beacon of greasy goodness in the middle of nowhere, its neon sign flickering with the same erratic rhythm as the dying light. Another familiar sight. Yet, the chipped paint and peeling vinyl siding looked worse, more decrepit than I remembered. A shiver ran down my spine. Could I have missed an exit somehow? Doubt gnawed at me. I knew this stretch of highway like the back of my hand. There weren't any hidden routes, no alternate bypasses. Suddenly, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, growing closer. A beat-up pickup truck barreled past, its windows tinted black. The driver, a hulking figure shrouded in shadow, didn't so much glance my way as peer through me, a look of chilling indifference on his distorted, grotesquely stretched face. The blood drained from my face. I slammed on the gas, desperate to put some distance between us. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo against the backdrop of the now endless desert landscape. And then, the water tower. The diner. The distorted faces staring from passing cars. Each element of this twisted reality seemed to decay ever so slightly with each repetition. The cracks in the pavement widened, the paint peeled even further from the diner, the moon casting an eerie, sickly green glow. The terror was paralyzing. Was I hallucinating? Was this some kind of fever dream? I pinched myself hard, the sharp sting a harsh confirmation that I was indeed awake, trapped in this nightmarish loop. Hours turned into what felt like a lifetime. Desperate for some kind of human interaction, I pulled into the deserted diner parking lot. The once inviting glow of the neon sign now resembled a festering wound, illuminating peeling paint and cobwebs like skeletal fingers reaching out to snag me. I hesitated, the fear a palpable weight on my chest. But the thought of facing another endless loop alone was unbearable. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the creaking door, a blast of stale air and a metallic tang of something rotten assaulting my senses. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the only light filtering through the grimy windows. Dusty booths sat empty, their red vinyl seats cracked and peeling. A lone fly buzzed against a shattered light bulb dangling from the grimy ceiling. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing eerily in the dead silence. No answer. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing. A sudden movement in the corner caught my eye. A figure hunched over a booth, its head buried in its hands. Relief flooded through me. Another human being. I cautiously approached the booth. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. The figure slowly raised its head. Its face, it was like looking into a funhouse mirror, contorted and distorted into a grotesque caricature of a human face. A scream died in my throat, replaced by a terrified gasp. Just then, a loud bang echoed outside, followed by the screech of tires. My head snapped towards the sound, a flicker of hope battling the fear that still clung to me like a shroud. Had someone else pulled in? Rushing outside, I found a dented state trooper car parked next to my own. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. A real person, a beacon of normality in this twisted world. "Are you all right, miss?" A gruff voice boomed from behind me. A state trooper, a woman with a kind face and a weary smile, emerged from the car. I don't know what's happening," I stammered, tears welling in my eyes. "I keep driving the same stretch of road, everything keeps looping." The trooper frowned. "You sure you haven't fallen asleep at the wheel?" She glanced at my exhausted face, then at the desolate diner. "Looks like you could use a rest. Anything to drink in that place?" I shook my head, the image of the grotesque figure flashing before my eyes. "No, ma'am. This place, it's not right." The trooper's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of concern. "All right," she said, her voice firm. "Let's get you back on the road. Follow me." Following the trooper's lead, I climbed back into my car, a sliver of hope flickering within me. We pulled out of the diner parking lot, and as we drove, I recounted the events of the night, the distorted radio, the looping highway, the grotesque faces. To my surprise, the trooper listened intently, her face grim. "We get calls about this stretch of road sometimes," she admitted. "Truckers who swear they see the same things you've described. Most folks write it off as fatigue. But..." She trailed off, then continued with a sigh. "There have been disappearances here. Folks vanish without a trace. Maybe it's something more." My heart hammered against my ribs. There were others? And disappearances? The fear threatened to engulf me again. We drove for what felt like an eternity, the trooper remaining silent, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Then, in the distance, a glimmer of light. Not the sickly neon of the diner, but the kind, steady glow of a gas station. "There," the trooper said, a hint of relief in her voice. "Civilization. Maybe a hot cup of coffee and a fresh start is what you need." As we pulled into the gas station, the first streaks of dawn painted the horizon with streaks of pale pink and orange. The world finally seemed to be coming back into focus, the colors returning to normal, the air smelling fresh instead of stale. The trooper filled my tank, her radio crackling to life with a familiar voice. "Dispatch to all units. State trooper responding to reports of a missing woman on Highway 10. She glanced at me, her gaze searching. "That wouldn't be you, would it?" I shook my head, a laugh escaping my lips, shaky and tinged with disbelief. "No, ma'am. But thank you. For everything." With a grateful smile, I paid for the gas and pulled back onto the highway, the trooper waving goodbye. The sun rose over the horizon, bathing the desert landscape in a golden glow. The scenery, once a source of dread, now looked beautiful, familiar. The memory of the loop still haunts me, a chilling reminder of the night reality fractured. Was it fatigue? A hallucination? Or something more sinister? I may never know. But one thing is certain, I'll never take a late-night drive on that desolate stretch of Highway 10 again. The diner, the distorted faces, the endless loop, these terrifying fragments of a nightmare serve as a constant reminder of the fragile boundary between sanity and the terrifying possibility of a world gone horribly wrong. And the knowledge that even the most familiar road can become a prison, a place where reality unravels and nightmares take hold. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway. Sarah and I, 2 years into a long-distance relationship, were finally stealing a week to explore the Pacific Coast Highway. The California sun beat down, the ocean shimmered turquoise on the horizon, and the radio blasted classic rock, setting the perfect soundtrack for our adventure. But the idyllic scene shattered around 2 p.m. The music started to distort, morphing into a high-pitched whine that sent shivers down my spine. Sarah, oblivious at first, frowned. "What's that horrible noise?" she asked, reaching for the volume knob. I stopped her. "Wait," I stammered, a primal fear gripping me. The whine seemed to vibrate inside my skull, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. An unsettling feeling, a creeping unease, settled in my gut. It's not the radio, is it?" Sarah asked, her voice losing its usual confidence. I flipped through the stations, each one filled with the same maddening whine. Panic clawed at my throat. This wasn't a malfunction. This was deliberate. We watched in horror as a car ahead of us swerved wildly. The driver, his face contorted in a mask of terror, slammed on the brakes, sending the car into a spin. He emerged, screaming a wordless cry, before stumbling onto the highway. Sarah gasped. "What's happening to him?" There was no time to answer. The whine intensified, burrowing deeper into my brain. Images flickered in my mind, warped faces, grotesque landscapes, a gnawing sense of dread. I fought back the urge to scream, to follow the driver towards the oblivious oncoming traffic. "We have to get off the road," I rasped, my voice barely above a whisper. We were on a long, desolate stretch of highway, miles from the nearest exit. Suddenly, a booming voice cut through the whine. "Attention all drivers. This is an emergency broadcast. Please stay calm and follow instructions." A sliver of hope flickered, then died. The voice was the same as the one echoing in my head, the same voice warping my mind. It was a cruel trick, a further torment. Desperation clawed at me. I remembered reading about a similar phenomenon years ago, a high-frequency sound used for crowd control that could cause hallucinations and panic attacks. But how to fight it? We needed to block the signal somehow. "Sarah," I yelled, forcing my words through the whine, "do you have a scarf?" Thankfully, she did. We ripped it into strips, stuffing them in our ears, a pathetic attempt at a shield against the maddening signal. The highway became a scene of utter chaos. Cars swerved, drivers screaming incoherently. One truck barreled towards us, its horn blaring a death knell. Sarah screamed, clutching the steering wheel. I slammed on the brakes, praying it would be enough. In a heart-stopping moment, the truck swerved at the last second, careening off the road into the desert scrub. We sat there, chests heaving, the deafening whine a constant assault. Then, a miracle. The whine began to fade, replaced by static. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. The signal was gone, but the effects lingered. We pulled over, shaken and disoriented. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parched landscape. Hours seemed to pass as we sat there, the silence ringing in our ears. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice trembling. "What just happened?" I shook my head, unable to articulate the horror we had witnessed. I don't know," I stammered. Cautiously, we got back on the road, driving at a snail's pace. Every passing car, every flicker on the radio dial, triggered a jolt of fear. It took us hours to reach the next town, a dusty outpost with a single gas station and a diner. We pulled in, desperate for any semblance of normalcy. As we ate a greasy breakfast, the terrifying events replayed in my mind. There was no explanation, no news report, nothing to validate what we had experienced. The diner owner, a gruff old man, listened to our story with a skeptical eyebrow raised. "Sounds like you two were just spooked," he said, wiping down the counter with a rag. "Highway can be a lonely place after dark." We left the diner, unsure whether to believe him or not. The rest of the trip was a blur. The Pacific Coast Highway, once a symbol of romance, now felt tainted, a reminder of the unseen dangers that lurked on the edge of reality. It was 2:17 a.m., the clock on the dashboard mocking me with its relentless reminder of just how bad of an idea this solo road trip across Montana had become. Exhaustion gnawed at my bones, and the endless black ribbon of highways stretched before me like a hungry maw. My phone, teetering on 2% battery, was my only connection to the outside world. Big mistake not filling up at the last gas station. Suddenly, a horrible sputter racked the engine, followed by an ominous silence. Dread coiled in my stomach. Stalled. In the middle of nowhere. Perfect. Panic threatened to take hold, but I forced it down. I wasn't one to crumble. I pulled out my phone, a flicker of hope igniting when I saw a single bar of signal. Dialing roadside assistance, I waited with bated breath. The automated voice confirmed my request and promised a tow truck within the estimated time frame of 1 to 3 hours. 3 hours? In this desolate stretch of highway? Great. As the silence settled back in, broken only by the mournful howl of a coyote, I noticed headlights cutting through the darkness. Relief flooded me, help had arrived. But as the truck drew closer, my relief curdled into unease. It wasn't a tow truck. It was a beat-up pickup, its windows so heavily tinted I couldn't see the driver. It slowed down, circling my car once, twice. My blood ran cold. I slammed my car doors shut, locking them with a click that sounded pathetically flimsy against the looming threat. The truck circled again, its headlights slicing through the night like accusing fingers. Why wasn't it stopping? Why was it circling? My phone, a useless brick in my trembling hand, displayed a notification: no service. No service? Of course not. Just fantastic. The truck stopped a few car lengths away, its engine idling in a menacing rumble. For what felt like an eternity, it sat there, shrouded in darkness. Then, a figure emerged. A tall, broad-shouldered silhouette, impossible to make out in the meager moonlight. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo against the unnerving silence. The figure approached, its gait slow, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. This was exactly what you read about in horror stories: stranded motorist, creepy stranger, middle of nowhere. I desperately fumbled with my glove compartment, searching for something, anything, to defend myself with. My fingers brushed against a forgotten travel-sized can of pepper spray. A flicker of hope. Maybe not the ultimate defense, but better than nothing. The figure stopped at my driver's side window, its obscured face mere inches away. The stench of stale cigarette smoke wafted through the cracked window. A voice, gruff and raspy, rasped out a single word: help. I hesitated. Was this a genuine offer or a sinister setup? My gut screamed the latter. I've called roadside assistance, I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure tilted its head, a movement both predatory and unsettling. Looks like you ain't got much signal out here. Long wait for a tow truck. Its voice was a low rumble, laced with an unsettling amusement. I can wait, I stammered, gripping the pepper spray tighter. The figure chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. You sure about that? It's mighty cold out here at night. I swallowed, my throat dry. I'll be fine. There was a tremor in my voice I couldn't control. The figure stared at me for a long, drawn-out moment, then spoke again. Suit yourself. Just remember, stranger danger ain't the only danger out here. It turned and retreated back to the truck, leaving me with a cryptic warning and a heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. The truck started, its engine roaring to life. For a moment, I thought it was leaving. But then, headlights blazed through my rearview mirror, the truck circling me once more. This wasn't help. This was a predator stalking its prey. The circling continued, once, twice, 3 times. Each lap gnawed at my sanity. I glanced at the dashboard clock, 2:43 a.m. A mere 26 minutes had passed, but it felt like an eternity. Then, from the crackling static of my dead radio, a news report cut through. Series of unsolved disappearances along Highway 80, all involving stranded motorists, foul play suspected. My breath hitched. Unsolved disappearances? Stranded motorists? The radio crackled again, the voice fading in and out. Authorities urge caution, avoid stopping, advise staying in your vehicle. Panic clawed at me. This wasn't just some creepy stranger. This was something else entirely. The truck stopped again, closer this time. My stomach churned. I gripped the pepper spray so hard my knuckles turned white, aiming it at the obscured figure outside. Then, A sound pierced the night, a distant rumble. Headlights appeared in the distance, growing closer. A second truck? My heart hammered a frantic rhythm. Was this another threat, or a beacon of hope? The headlights grew brighter, revealing a tow truck emblazoned with a familiar yellow logo. Relief washed over me in a tidal wave. The tow truck pulled up behind the beat-up pickup, its headlights momentarily blinding the menacing figure. The driver, a burly man with a weathered face, jumped out. "Car trouble," he boomed, his voice cutting through the tension. I choked back a sob. "Yes. Thank God you're here." The driver glanced at the beat-up truck, his brow furrowed. "Looks like you have some company." He turned towards the figure, his voice stern. "Everything all right here?" The figure remained silent, its form shrouded in shadow. The tow truck driver repeated his question, this time with a hint of menace. The silence stretched on, then a gruff voice mumbled something unintelligible. The figure turned and retreated back to the truck, its engine roaring back to life. It sped away without a backward glance. The tow truck driver watched it go, then turned back to me. "Don't worry, ma'am. Seen that creep a few times before. He takes one look at a stranded driver and seems to enjoy scaring the bejesus out of them." He chuckled, but the sound lacked any humor. He mentioned disappearances," I stammered, my voice shaky. The driver's smile faltered. "There have been rumors," he admitted, his voice low. "Nothing confirmed, but it's best not to take any chances on this stretch of road at night." As the tow truck towed my car towards the nearest town, the adrenaline slowly drained from my body, replaced by a bone-deep chill. The news report, the circling truck, the cryptic warning, it was all too real. Looking back at the deserted highway, now bathed in the pale light of dawn, I couldn't help but shudder. I had been a target, and by sheer luck, I had escaped. The encounter left me shaken, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows, even in seemingly ordinary places. It was a lesson learned the hard way. Some journeys are better left untaken, especially alone and at night. Back home, safe and sound, I canceled the rest of my solo road trip. Montana's vast beauty now held a sinister edge, a lingering fear that the desolate highway and the menacing pickup truck would forever be etched in my memory. A reminder of the night I stared into the face of danger, and through a stroke of luck, lived to tell the tale.